Hey, man.
All right.
There you go.
Thanks. Oh,
All right.
wow.
You feel comfortable?
As comfortable as I can be. I'm like a foot and a half taller than you.
Okay. Yeah, just push it back and we should be fine. We're sitting in his Florida room, which is fitting because we're in Florida. We're also being really bad examples because we're smoking cigarettes. But they're natural. They're American spirits. So the rule is if you buy something craft, like if you buy craft beer, you can't be an alcoholic. Those are the rules. But you got to spend the money on it.
You're allowed to wear reflective sunglasses out here.
Yeah, well, I only do it sometimes. But anyway, so we are going to be doing a discussion about the self-existentialism, kind of a different mixture of topics. Some of you might not know my man Robert is in college and very intelligent guy. Really excited about seeing what he's going to do. But these are things that he's delving into in his current courses. It's stuff I've delved to in the past and I'm also passionate about. And I just love talking with you about you just discovering like the world of philosophy because it is incredible and ancient. Right?
It's fun.
Yeah.
Like we talked about Thomas Aquinas before, and he was bridging the gap between religion and philosophy during his period, trying to prove to the Christians that you don't have to separate the two, that you can, in fact, have a philosophical debate and involve religion. They're not necessarily a dichotomy. They're not separate. They're one and the same. And
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Well, I think at one point in time, like kind of a modern thing for us that you may not know is the separation of church and state. I used to not be a thing. The church was the state for like a long time, and not just Christianity, but whatever towns you had or whatever cities or villages, you would have a patron deity, and they would said to be appointed their human image, right? So they would have a ruler and stuff like that. So you may think that our modern way of doing things is more enlightened, but what we've done is just take the image of a deity out of it and completely replaced it with people. We try to balance that out with documents that are supposed to be some standard we hold to, but we all know there's ways around that.
Yeah.
But I think even in America, we can be grateful to an extent that if it wasn't for the courts, this crap would be out of control, I think.
Well,
even they fail us sometimes, but there's some like kind of like legitimate break. And I was even talking, I didn't expect to get on this, sorry. I was even talking to my friends Blake about this. I said, why does there need to be people full-time employed to make laws?
because everything's changing constantly.
Yeah, but do you need to make, is laws in response to things changing the proper response? Or do you just need principles to adjust to those changes by? Right? Because if you're afraid of fraud and theft and any of that type of stuff, well, that's already illegal. So what are you really doing?
You're creating language that covers all the holes you missed the first time you created the rule.
Yeah, but you have no way of knowing until you let it play out.
Right, and that's why once it plays out, you need somebody who's full-time to go, okay,
no, you don't need someone full-time to do it.
Internet is also fraud.
Okay, because if you employ someone to do something full-time, they're going to do that thing full-time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't need it full-time.
Well, I mean, they don't really, Congress doesn't
I
really
mean,
operate
imagine
full-time.
Okay, imagine this. Imagine that for some reason our lawn mowing services all got socialized, right? And it's a full-time thing. It's the government lawn mowing institution. That's all we know, right? It's just always been that way. Well, they're just mowing lawns all the time. It doesn't even matter if you need your lawn mowed. You could just go outside and be like, "Hey, man, what are you doing?" It's like, "I'm mowing the lawn. That's my job." It's like, "What doesn't need to be mowed?" It's like, "Well, that's my job." That's what the government basically does. In California, they actually had social workers, and I'm not saying this is good or bad, but they actually had social workers calling people that were not on assistance saying, "Hey, did you know that you're available to receive financial assistance from the government?"
I can see that being beneficial, though.
Yes, to some people.
Yeah.
Because they may not be aware. However, you have to understand what their motivation is. Simply because something moves from the private realm private sector into the public sector does not eliminate self-interest or bias.
Sure.
The only difference between private institutions and government institutions is you cannot pick if you're a patron or not. It's the only difference.
Yeah, I can't argue against
But
that.
it has the veneer of being objective or somehow disinterested.
I don't know. I like the idea of every different state and every different small region being able to pick what is and isn't
Yeah,
important to them.
I agree with that because, again, like there's a million ways to do things and you can't assume one way of doing. I mean, well, it's insanity to assume one way of doing things is going to be good for everyone.
Well, yeah, that's why I like the concept of them being able to alter things on the fly as they go.
Yeah. However, I think that's actually best done through the courts.
You mean legislation through.
Legislation through courts, common law.
Well, the reason we have the three branches of government, I thought, was so that the judicial system didn't have all the power. Like the Supreme Court writes in their dissents all the time that they shouldn't be able to legislate from the bench.
Yeah, but there's even things built in within the courts to address those things. I mean, there's appeals and stuff. Because what you have now, you have government appointed judges, and I don't have anything against government appointed judges, but you have to realize they can be bribed too. And they do. And it happens. And
anybody's open to bribe.
And then so when you talk about a concept like private courts, one of the first things that comes up is like, well, what if the judge gets bribed? I'm like, well, that does happen now. You have to understand that. But the difference is a judge might be bribed, a government judge, and there might be a big stink about it, and they may let it go away, and then he just returns to their normal, right? With a private judge, more than likely, they would have to fire him regardless. Or if he was the sole practitioner of his business, well, guess what? If you're caught showing that you're not impartial, you're not going to get business.
Sure.
So I think when you implement a government institution, you instantly take back the useful feedback that the market provides. And when I say the market, I mean it's literally our choices.
Voting with your dollar, the free market is important.
It is.
Yeah, but they're.
Well, look. Take for instance what I'm doing right now. I do gig work. I'm self-employed. I do Instacart, Uber, and blah blah blah. He does it too. This is actually a really good development. Some people look at it pessimistic. They're like, oh, we're building a whole nother servant class. Well, I don't care. I get paid for the work I do. I don't have to work for them. I don't have to do anything I don't want to. And they have to be nice to me because I don't have to do it. Right. I got my power back. I'm not giving it back.
Well,
That's a good development.
We're choosing to be able to operate in that.
That's a good development.
When you're working as a waitress or a waiter, that is more along those lines. You're working for $6 an hour, and then you may or may not get tips. When you're doing your job, you get or pizza or taxi, you get a flat rate based on every job you do. So you're getting a percentage that's straight across the board plus an additional incentive. And you don't have to do it all the time. You can pick and choose.
I mean, I do it full time. However, I've met one of my son's teachers, and she's doing it. I mean, she makes good money, but it's
you only met
a
one
good
of your
thing.
son's teachers.
Yeah.
You only met one. I'm just being fun.
Well, she was Instacart shopping, and then I met an elderly person. So here's another thing. I didn't expect to get on economics, but we'll go to the other topics. I met an elderly man. He's doing it to get extra income. Seems simple enough, but so laws like minimum wage, they prevent him from getting jobs because it doesn't make any financial sense to hire a senior to do something when they're limited in their abilities. And that's not bad mouthing seniors. It's just it's hard to learn new skills as you get older. This is scientifically proven. You can't work as long and different things like that. Well, he can do this. He can make the extra income that he needs, and he can only do it when he feels up to it. And then you got these, low-skilled workers, teenagers. They're excluded from a lot of the job market because they don't have experience in some of these jobs. You will lose money hiring them, basically.
Yeah.
So
minimum wage stops the free market when it comes to employer. If I don't want to work for you because you don't pay enough, then I can choose not to work for you. I can choose to work for somebody.
But
who offers me more.
minimum wage ensures that you don't get paid enough, and also that everybody else in that field doesn't get paid enough.
Right.
That's what it ensures.
if anything is keeping the social class in place, it is a form of minimum wage.
Oh yeah, and realize this too, and then we'll move on to different things. You realize they don't need your taxes at all. They don't need your taxes. Taxes are not really, well, I'm talking about the federal level, and even a little bit at the state level, but it's a little more complicated, and I don't fully understand it. But they do not need your taxes to pay for anything. They don't really pay for stuff. They invent money.
Yeah.
This is fucking fictitious. I'm sorry for the language if that offends you, but you realize they tax you for the purpose of getting that ingrained that in your head that you're subjected to them, but they are spending you and your grandchildren and their grandchildren into oblivion. If our taxes paid for our services, well, guess what? They have already spent all the taxes that you will ever pay in your lifetime, and then a lot more.
Oh God, we've been operating in a deficit for
and the whole world's doing that. People need to wake up to this stuff, man. They are making you debt slaves, and the system is going to crumble eventually. So I think that it would be smart of us adults to create things that are totally independent from them. So when their overly complicated system collapses, we're not standing there with our pants down, so to speak.
Yeah, it'll happen soon enough, but people are moving back towards bartering. People are selling things online.
It's great. I like it. All right, well, the self.
All right.
Tell us a little bit about what.
Self-identity. There's a few different things that come to it, but a majority of it is, how do you characterize yourself? Is it just the roles and statuses that you fulfill? Is it your title, or is there something else that makes up your essence apart from those? So I guess that's an extremely interesting question. You and I differ on it, I think, because yourself is separate from you. For me, I see these all as one thing, but I know you feel your mind and your consciousness are separate entities.
I wouldn't say that you. How did you determine you and you were separate, or in myself? Okay, so here's where their language gets tricky. Okay, so the way you used it, you equate your mind and your body with you.
Yeah.
That's your perspective where you come from.
Yes.
My perspective is that I believe that you have a mind and a body, obviously. But I would say that you is where those two things proceed from, have their origination.
Then we move on to choices, like existentialism, right. When we're talking about you exist as the choices that you've made, the things that you hold in high regard, and your morality and your tendency to stick to that morality. So we have job titles, we have roles. Are those the most important, or is it when push comes to shove, that we won't hurt somebody, or that we will maintain our level of honor or dignity or what have you in the face of absolute, pushback? So.
Well, I think that what we should be doing is what we truly desire to do.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It's easier said than done, though.
It's the hardest thing on the planet.
It's simultaneously the hardest thing, but the most freeing and easy thing on the planet. I'm not saying anything about myself, but I've gone through existential crisis and dark night of the soul and all those different things that you want to call it. And I even
ego death.
I had an ego death experience, which was really intense. I cried for 6 hours until I passed out. But it was beneficial for me because, you don't know how conditioned you are to really bottle in your emotions until the chickens come home to roost, so to speak.
Oh, especially men.
Oh, yeah.
We're taught toxic masculinity is appropriate and that we need to just suck it up, buttercup, and suck on a salt cube.
Well, I was over at a friend's house, so I'm a father of 3. I have 3 boys. I was going to school full time for a bit and homeschooling our children. So I spent a lot of time with my children when they were young. I was their primary caregiver.
Yeah.
It's our life situation. It's just how it worked out at the time. Well, they're naturally comfortable with me, and oftentimes they'll just come up in public. It doesn't matter where they are. They want to sit in my lap, or they want to come and put their head on me, or they want to hug. They just do it. Affection is a normal thing. However, me and my son were over at my friend's house, and his dad didn't do that, and he just thought it was so strange that my son was cuddling with me.
Yeah.
But that's just my boy. There's nothing weird about it. He's just always cuddled with me. That's what he likes to do. So, but yeah, I can see what you're saying.
It's a constant.
But realize that beneath every toxic incarnation of something, there is a pure something.
Sure. You have to be able to let it out, though, without feeling like society is going to shun us for it.
Okay, so I guess maybe one of the questions that we can spur off for that is, why do you feel, and maybe I'm misquoting you, but why do you feel as if the choices you make constitute the substance, maybe so to say, of who you are?
All of us have a similar genetic makeup for the most part. I mean, all of us are people. All of us live within the same systems of law in Florida or Crestview or where have you. I feel like your ability to truly be free comes from your ability to express your choices. So being able to choose to do the right thing in the face of even social adversity is probably the most important characteristic for me for who somebody is. Like choosing not to join a gang, choosing not to operate within the system, kind of like you're talking about, choosing to do your own thing despite all of the social pressure that would come, or whatever the rigid system has determined you should do. That is what forms a person. It's the malleability of the human being to maintain its internal strength versus all the weather of the world is the most important thing. And as Sartre tells us, the only time that you fail or that you do not succeed is when you are a coward. And when you are a coward, that is when you do not live up to your own personal expectations, when you do not do what you feel is best.
That's good.
Lying to yourself is the ultimate sin.
Self-deception.
Yes. So I feel like that matches similar with some of the stuff you mentioned, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Well, here's an idea, though. Have you ever heard of that phrase? It's from the Bible, but other people quote it. But everything.
Bible. What's this Bible?
Shut up.
Okay.
But you heard the phrase, everything has been done under the sun.
Yeah.
All right. So if our choices really constitute and make us who we are, and everything's been done under the sun, then how can any of us have any real distinction? Because all the combinations, if you think mathematically, they've already been done, and there's probably there's probability that there'll be another person exactly like you. So if that's the case, then how could there ever be any real you?
I would argue that with the sheer number of minutes, hours, and seconds that a person lives and the sheer number of choices that are available, it would be improbable for somebody to be exactly the same.
Improbable, but taking a page from the evolutionist, which I'm not against evolution. I'm not really interested in the topic. But taking a page from the evolutionist, given enough time, it'll happen.
I don't know, but nobody's going to be born in my grandma's house. Nobody's going to...
Well,
you know what I mean? Like, there's
Sarah, you're engaging in philosophy. I'm going to have to ask you to stop. I'm trying to be empirical right now.
Me too.
I'm joking.
Where you're born, what day you're born.
No.
I mean, all of it plays into it.
I know, but mathematically speaking, they're very small, but given enough time, it would happen. There would be another person, had the exact same makeup, and would be born in the same place, similar type conditions.
It's maybe the same place, but if it takes 100 years, the conditions are going to be wildly different. The governance will be
right.
different.
So
the volcanic ash blocking out the sun.
So perhaps the what do they call it? You got the genetic and you got the phenotype. So how it's outwardly expressed. So maybe the outwardly you or the exact match to you looks different, but has all the same bells and whistles as you would say that you have.
Okay.
So, I mean, do we get into cloning? If you clone someone, do they have a consciousness?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say yeah.
Is it yours?
No.
You don't think it's your consciousness?
It would start as a facsimile of you, but the moment it made any different kind of choice, like trying to survive or not being erased, like if you watch Altered Carbon, they make copies of themselves. And
So their brain would be functioning, and you think they would be conscious or have a form of consciousness?
Yeah.
Do you think it's stable?
I guess that depends on the procedure. I would like to think it was possible for them to be stable, but it would depend on the procedure. I think that seeing yourself and realizing that you were a copy and that you were just born 5 minutes ago would probably make you unstable as a rule mentally.
I'm almost thinking, like, if I were to clone, if we were to take a exact clone, it would almost function as like a physically walking ego. It would be like a further projection of you.
Yeah, but given enough time and enough travel,
It would alter, but your personality and ego alters too over time.
Sure. It would be a different branch.
So I'm trying to get this rabbit back to the whole of exactly. We know there's a million things that can happen, and happenings just happen. All right, but you do things. But how are you those things?
When somebody saves a bus full of children, or a firefighter goes into a burning building, or a president decides to start war, we remember people for those things. The perception to other people and the perception to yourself of the meaning of those choices defines those choices. I mean, if I had a different moral compass or I was a sociopath, it would have no effect. I wouldn't care. But our ability to have some form of human empathy gives us a grading curve, and our experiences give us an understanding of what it means to run into a burning building or what it means to start a war. We're always comparing and contrasting what we would do to what other people would do. But when it comes down to the minute, being able to retain who you are as a person or who you thought you were as a person in the midst of everything going wrong, that is true humanity.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
However, you have to realize it's not the choices itself, because the choices is an action you decided to do, but what you used, right? What was the base level of what you used to make that decision is who you are.
So
some people would call it your character.
But if you morally knew that you should make a choice and then you didn't make that choice, are you still that moral person?
I think it changes your personality, character, ego, or whatever you want to call it. But your essence, no, I don't think it does. So I think the only reason that you're having an internal conflict with the choice is because it contradicts with your inner being.
Yeah. But if you don't do the moral thing when you have the option, right, I would argue you are an immoral person. Or at least that action was immoral. Right.
Currently, as it stands in the physical realm, you're acting as an immoral person. Right? So this is a distinction I actually make in my personal relationships. I try not to call people names, but I will say things like, you're acting like a jerk right now.
Yeah.
I'm not calling them a jerk because I don't think they're a jerk, but they're acting out of character.
Okay.
I would say. So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm not equating what they just did with them, and I'm not making a judgment on it.
But you're judging the things that they're doing.
Right, but they're independent of them. The action or the morality, it's independent of them. It has nothing to do with them. But they made a choice. And here's the other paradoxical nature about freedom. When you make a choice, you actually restrict yourself because you're cutting off all other avenues.
But sitting and not making a decision doesn't progress the story forward.
It doesn't progress the story, but you're not the story. If you're in a coma, you're still you. You're not doing anything. You're not making choices.
Yeah, but
you still have an essence. People know who Robert is, and it's not what you did. It's your essence.
I would argue that it was what I did, though. They would remember the good
I think
times.
What you did is an expression of your essence, not you.
So if what we do is an expression of our essence, then what we do defines our essence to other people and ourselves.
Right, but what I'm saying is, I can look at an artist painting. I know that's not the artist.
But it's an expression. But right. They chose to do those things.
Yes, but it's a deeper... What I'm saying is, if you want to get to the root of the thing, it's at a deeper level than just thoughts and mind and choices.
So what is the essence of you then? Like, is it unique to you, or is it a component that everybody shares?
There's a commonality, I think, between all people of that. What you would define as you is just pure consciousness. Now there is some
Was that physical or immaterial essence?
It's immaterial. The best way I would describe it is maybe you would look at white light as pure consciousness, and once it passes through a prism, then you get the distinction. Yeah, you can have
You're a
a
good
cigarette.
person.
Right. So
Good choice.
Yeah. Once it
Sorry.
once it passes through the prism, then you have the distinction,
Mhm.
breaking down the white light, but it still has the same source. It's from the same thing, even though it has distinction, and that's what I think human consciousness is.
Given that, do you believe that you could undertake a new identity?
Yes.
Okay. So something like a religious conversion or like a new status at work, or does it have to do with something about your day-to-day choices?
Well-
what is that new identity?
Well, this kind of branches off into something interesting. I think he was an existentialist too, but Carl Jung studied archetypes. All right. So if you're not familiar with an archetype, what Carl Jung basically did was study religions, history, art, different things, and he saw common patterns of behavior. So something that we really would understand is, like, say you're watching a movie and you're like, oh, that guy's the hero. You just pointed out an archetype because he's acting like a hero. So you got to understand that the archetype is independent from the person acting out the role. So yes, you can change your identity because there's different archetypes in life to adopt.
But to adopt these different archetypes, one would have to alter the choices that they're making to fit those archetypes, right?
Right, but what you're doing is not altering yourself, your true self so much, as more aligning with your true self with the appropriate archetype.
But if your choices leading to a new archetype change what your identity could be, would that not mean that the choices are the most important thing if they're
That would be you
shifting your paradigm?
That would be you constructing and possessing something new, but but you have to understand you possess it. You're not it. You possess it.
What makes you the same person over time versus getting a new identity? How do you know who you are minute to minute, hour to hour? Are you the same person, or are you constantly altering?
I think you can look over the course of your life, and you can see like a common thread amongst the choices you made. Now, the choices you made varied because not only are you learning, you are human and emotional, and you have a mind, and the mind is happy, sad, I like this, I don't like this, all right? So you will see some variance. But I think over a course of the time, you will see expressed through people's actions their true nature.
But are you still the same person if your religion, your music taste, your memory is lost? Like, that's a big thing about identity is memory loss, because they talk about if somebody has Alzheimer's, are they still the same person, but based on a communal history?
They're the same person, but they're hard to get to. And I experienced this, my grandfather, I think I was just about to turn 11. For some reason, my dad brought me when my grandfather was dying. I'm not mad about it, but it was just weird. I still don't know to this day why I went with him and I was the only one.
It's important.
I guess. But he lived, it was like 5 hours away. We arrived in the middle of the night, and my grandfather was sitting up in the recliner. He was in hospice. He had lung cancer. And he was on so many pain meds, he was mostly out of it. But he saw me and he went, "Hey!" And then he went back to his normal state.
Right.
What happened was he recognized me. That was it. He didn't have to think about it. He just recognized me. So he was still there. It's just like the lanes of communication are cut off.
It's the most
Because
difficult part.
you need a physical mind to translate this, what you know and what you're thinking, or the thoughts that you're currently toying with, into the physical realm. I mean,
But there are those that would argue that if you know nothing any longer, then there's nothing to translate. That the essence would have been gone.
I mean, dude, so there might be a point where functionally your mind and brain cease to exist, although they're still physically present. I mean, they're going to deteriorate. But what I would say, the essence of who you are, your consciousness is still there. Maybe not still present in the body, but how would you get rid of it?
Well, because I believe the mind and consciousness
right.
are the same. Yeah, so it goes into like what makes us individual people at all.
Okay, so but you could still say
That's a good question.
that person is still alive.
Yes.
Scientifically speaking, that person is still alive.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so but however, they have research papers where people who have shown no brain activity later recounted that they were fully aware of everything that was going on.
And I've seen, this is amazing. I've seen there was a Harvard study that was done with Alzheimer's patients where they ended up having to pick a painting. They said, here's 3 paintings, you can pick your favorite, you can keep that. And they had 2 schools. They had the ones, well, if you pick this painting, it is your painting forever and you only get that painting. You'll never change it. And the other test subjects were like, hey, in a week we'll come back. If you don't like that fucking painting, we'll give you another fucking painting.
Right.
It turned out they would leave for like an hour and come back, and the people that didn't have an option to change their painting still immediately wanted that painting. Moreover, like 90% of the time, because they were creating their own happiness. They were creating their own... Something about their subconscious level knew that was the one that they were supposed to have. And the others were unhappy with their choice. Even though they didn't have any short-term memory, they were consciously or subconsciously unhappy with the initial decision because there's still a part of their brain that was operating that knew there was a fucking choice. We tend to be happy. We tend to be happy without freedom. It's so weird.
Well, I wouldn't. That's true and not true. I think we're happy when we're not attached to what happens. Like when we get out of the details, I think we become happier. Now, I think what you just expressed is actually something that Rene Girard talked about, which is mimetic theory. His theory, and maybe it's a little bit too pessimistic, but you can see this bear out. But his theory is that human desire is primarily based on observation and mimicking what we see. So it's not until we actually see someone else have the object or doing the thing do we want to actually do it.
Right. Seeing somebody else's wife makes us want to have that wife.
Well, a child, like my friend has a 10-month-old son. He's a really cool dude. He has... Huh?
The 10-year-old?
No, the 10-month-old.
Oh, 10-month-old. So
right.
10-month-old's cool.
Right, so I can have my phone in the pocket. He's perfectly content and aware, and it's not until he sees that I have a phone that he wants the phone.
Right.
It's really that simple, but adults act this way and they're not even aware.
Right. Kids need to have what you're drinking, even if they have the same shit in their cup.
Right, but the more important thing to this theory is not to laugh at people, but it's actually to check yourself and realize what's going on, because a lot of these, even in politics, is heavily mimetic. I mean, that's basically what it operates on. They will tell you there's these people over here and they're unfairly and nefariously enriching themselves off of you, and that very well may be true, but it may not be the people that they're talking about.
Right.
This actually comes from the people that are robbing you will actually tell you that other people are robbing you.
Of course, politics. They're like,
even though they're helping those same people to rob you.
So, is it consciousness, awareness, or self-consciousness, which is you being aware of your consciousness, that is the driving factor?
I would say that your self-awareness is your consciousness.
We agree. Self-awareness, knowing that I am both conscious and aware that I am separate from other people.
It's different because it's knowing, it's not thinking. It's not thought.
However you put it.
Right. Well, okay, so if you think that there are things to discover that are true, then you cannot say that choices make you up. Because you're responding to something that's independent from you.
I would argue that self-awareness, making you inherently individual, would mean that all of your choices make you individual. Like, does that make sense? I
mean, you're an individual already. There's nothing that can be done about it. It's just the nature of things.
But there is the reason we want to live in a democratic republic versus like a socialist commune,
right?
Because we don't necessarily want to operate like all the people around us. We are very driven to be an individual. We want to be able to make our own choices based on external stimuli.
Right, which is fine. But the problem arises when somebody does something that we do not want them to do, or they do not do something we would prefer them to do, and then for some reason everyone's inner Karen ignites and wants to make you.
But then we characterize them by their choices. Like, I've been arrested, and I was characterized for a poor choice that I made once. and I still am, unfortunately. But
that's not you.
that's probably the best argument you made all day.
Yeah.
Okay, you're right, but I am still aware that I shouldn't have made that choice.
Yeah, but you realize that a lot of people would judge you about that one thing.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, Robert the drunk, whatever it was. I don't actually know what it was, but
It was pot.
okay, it was pot. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
But
I don't
whatever.
care.
Like, it happened. Big deal. There's actually very successful people that have done great things that have DUIs and drug arrests and all that stuff. It's not a big deal. Because that's the stupid secret. We punish people for it when everybody does it. Why?
Well, the people that get caught get punished.
Yeah, well, the people that can't afford proper legal representations, which is why I think it's another critique of public courts.
So Rene Descartes said that, as a rationalist, thinking alone means you exist. Cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am.
Right.
And that because you doubt your existence, you must exist. Where John Locke was more about self-consciousness. He doesn't think that the soul stays the same. It's constantly changing, constantly being changed, but the memories are the common thread that hold that together. Now, we talked about Alzheimer's, so there's problems with that, and that's when we get over to Hume. He was a skeptic. He refused he was refused a professorship as a heretic. He didn't necessarily believe any perception was real. He basically was like, fuck everything.
I've met those guys.
Yes.
Nihilist.
Maybe basically that the world is in such constant flux and movement, all things are changed, even the way you remember things.
So you cannot rely on any observation, even empirical.
Right, because if your empirical data is based on your memory, and our memories are constantly changing based on age or bias, then that common thread is not really a common thread.
Well, see, this is why I say to people that are empirically minded, I say that empiricism, hooray, but if you're going to accept empiricism, I don't know what grounds you're rejecting religious experience.
Well, I don't have empirical data for religious experience.
You don't have empirical data, but you still have data. But not all data is empirical in nature. So you're cutting off your feet at that point.
I don't think so.
Yeah, well, okay. So how do you collect empirical data, though? So that's what I want to know.
Writing things down, doing peer-reviewed studies.
No, those are the actions. By what medium do you do empirical work? Your conscious observation.
Yes, but by writing that down so that memories don't alter, and then by doing peer review, we allow for the removal of biases.
Right, I understand that this is how we get to a closest approximation that we can.
Mm-hmm.
However,
I don't know that this is perfect.
At the basis, it still relies on something that we generally consider subjective.
All things being subjective, it is difficult. We're doing the best we can. I don't have a perfect answer.
But you cannot deny subjectivity as not being true if you're using something that's subjective in nature to prove something that's objective.
If there's a large portion of the population that would disagree with another portion of the population, I can't say either of them are right. I have no proof that I am correct.
I think that's the correct way to go.
Yes, I do not know that I'm correct, but I have faith and belief based on what I know and how I feel that I am correct versus the others. That's the best I can come with.
Here's something I would like to consider. Yeah. So in quantum physics, they have a phenomenon. It's called quantum entanglement. All right.
That's a big subject.